Hello there, welcome to Planet America's Situation Room. I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello, and you guessed it, we have a situation.
Fight to redraw the nation's congressional maps escalating.
Two major court decisions now giving the Republicans the upper hand.
What is the likelihood Democrats can win back one, if not both, chambers of Congress?
Some lawmakers are calling for reforms on gerrymandering.
Both sides do it. It's awful.
With war and inflation weighing down Trump's polls, has he found a way to cling to power in the midterm?
And if the war wasn't enough to distract voters from Epstein, well, maybe UFOs are. But first...
The US-Iran ceasefire has entered its second month, but hopes that one of the various peace plans or even a one-page memorandum of understanding could lead to a more permanent end to the conflict have proven elusive, despite White House claims again this week that it was getting close to an agreement. Not close enough, though, and President Trump didn't like Iran's response to his latest peace offering.
I have just read the response from Iran's so-called representatives. I don't like it. Totally unacceptable.
So it's an impasse. Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz, the US blockading Iranian ports, and nobody seems to know how this will end. Still, gone are the days when wars tended to end with ticker tape parades and sailors kissing girls in Times Square. The US Secretary of State actually declared the war with Iran was over this week in kind of an offhanded way.
Yeah, look, the Operation Epic Fury is concluded. We achieved the objectives of that operation.
Which would be true if the objectives were to have Iran impose a stranglehold on shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, spiking inflation around the world while retaining its stockpiles of enriched uranium, missiles and drones. And let's just forget that bit about the Iranian people rising up and changing their regime. Yet...
the operation is over. Epic Fury, as the President notified Congress, we're done with that stage of it. Okay, we're now on to this Project of Freedom.
But Secretary Rubio didn't even have time to get Project Freedom's name right.
Project of Freedom.
Before it fell apart.
President Trump moments ago announcing that he is pausing Project Freedom, that the U.S. military mission to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz.
Jesse Waters on Fox News was doing his best to spin this unexpected pause.
We can only speculate that the Iranians called the White House urgently and said, you know, we can't have it. We can't be embarrassed like this as these ships sail out of a strait we promised we controlled.
Nice try, Jesse, but according to NBC News, Trump surprised Gulf allies by announcing Project Freedom on social media, angering leadership in Saudi Arabia, which then informed the US it would not allow them to fly aircraft from the Prince Sultan Air Base southeast of Riyadh or fly through Saudi airspace to support this effort.
I think there might have been more to it, though, than just poor communication, John. I suspect Saudi Arabia might have observed Pete Hegseth talking tough like this.
If you attack American troops or innocent commercial shipping, you will face overwhelming and devastating American firepower.
And they would have seen Trump saying things like this.
Spoke with President Trump for 20 minutes about the situation with Iran, saying if the Iranians try to target U.S. ships in this area, they will be, quote, blown off the face of the earth.
And then they saw Iran respond to Project Freedom by openly attacking UAE and South Korean ships and also a UAE oil port, only to then see Trump respond to that by saying, well, it wasn't heavy firing and it wasn't huge damage, and that Iran bombing the UAE was not a ceasefire violation. Surprise, surprise, less than 2 hours later, Iran attacked the UAE again. Now, I'm not sure the Gulf states were super impressed by Trump taking them for granted. I say that because Saudi Arabian representatives openly told I-24 News that they would restrict American access to their bases and airspace until America provides proper protection from Iranian attacks. And they told the US they were very angry at the reaction from the Pentagon, and they only ended up reversing their decision to freeze America out around the same time America started retaliating against Iran with a few airstrikes. Although that was also after Iran attacked American ships. Either way, John, not Trump's finest piece of diplomacy.
Yeah, and that's saying something. Meanwhile, pressure was mounting on the United States to try and find a way to reopen the strait, even though they also want to claim credit for being the ones who are actually imposing the blockade. Constant chatter of a deal being close seems to, though, have had more to do with keeping a lid on oil prices. Although, this week, the average price at American petrol pumps did pass $4.50 a gallon. That according to the analysts at Gas Buddy. The president was asked about that.
No, gas prices have come down today. Have you looked? They've come down very substantially today.
Did they though? Gas Buddy analyst Patrick DeHaan replied,
"Yeah, I've looked, and $4.55 a gallon is down 2 cents from the recent peak, but I've also seen prices a year ago averaged $3.13 a gallon."
A case of presidential gaslighting, perhaps. Still, it is the price of crude oil that is really bouncing around on all this news of possible deals to reopen the strait. And someone with some very good oil is cashing in bigly. According to capital markets analysts at the Kabisi letter, at 3:40 a.m. last Wednesday in New York, around $920 million worth of crude oil shorts were taken 70 minutes before an Axios news report claimed that the US and Iran were near a 14-point deal to end the war. Now, a short is basically a bet that a commodity or a stock price is going to go down, not up. And lo and behold, by 7 a.m, oil had fallen 12%, reaping someone a profit of a cool $125 million in around 3 hours. But while some are profiteering on markets, economic damage more broadly is being done. And with American elections less than 6 months away, it increasingly seems that Iran has America over an oil barrel, Chaz.
Yeah, apparently the DOJ is investigating $2.5 billion worth of insider trading in just 4 trades of oil contracts. You'll be pretty corrupt before they draw a line.
Yeah.
But back to the war. Trump's in a delicate position at the moment, certainly more delicate than you would expect. Firstly, we're now learning some of the things that America has been hiding from us, like that Iran damaged or destroyed at least 228 structures at American military sites. Far more destruction than what's been previously acknowledged by the Pentagon. In fact, there's been so much damage that some US bases were considered too dangerous to staff properly, and their personnel have been moved out of range. For at least some of those bases, it's considered unlikely that America will be returning anytime soon. And if you're wondering why we didn't know about this before, it's because satellite companies have complied with a request from the US government, their biggest customer, to limit, delay or withhold the publication of imagery from the Middle East during the war. So the Pentagon's been free to lie as much as it likes. Furthermore, America has used more of its missiles than we thought. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, during the first 6 weeks of the war alone, America used at least 190 THAAD interceptors, which is 53% of its inventory, and over 1,000 Patriot interceptors, which is 43% of its pre-war inventory. That's in just 6 weeks. Well, at least that's what the boffins say. But maybe you believe Trump instead.
But all over the world, we have tremendous amounts of inventory, the best. For instance, we're stocked and locked and loaded. Right now, we have more than double what we had when this started.
You might find that convincing. But the important thing is that according to US officials, Iran hasn't used as many of its missiles as we thought. They say Iran's retained about 75% of its pre-war inventories of mobile launchers and about 70% of its pre-war stockpiles of missiles. Even more concerning for America, a CIA report this week said Iran can survive the blockade for at least 3 to 4 months before facing more severe economic hardship. So what makes all this so delicate? Well, according to the Financial Times, the oil market is 4 weeks away from a tipping point that will drive prices significantly higher. That article was written a week ago, by the way. Analysts have projected that global stocks of crude, gasoline, diesel and jet fuel will all hit critically low levels by the end of May. And that's when prices are going to escalate rapidly. Now, that's not good news for any of us. So, fine, Trump can just sign off on a deal, end this war right now, can't he? Simple. Well, they tried that last month with a cash for uranium deal where America would release around $20 billion in frozen uranium funds in exchange for Iran handing over its stockpile of highly enriched uranium. But then Trump was warned by his team that was kind of close to the Obama deal with Iran that Trump has criticized for like a decade, and so Trump pulled the plug. But now, that's the only deal that's on the table. So what's Trump going to do, John? Iran's fought back harder, held up better than he expected. Iran's not about to fall apart. America is wasting a lot of weaponry in this war. Meanwhile, America is getting closer and closer to a genuine petrol price crisis that can cost the election for the Republicans. And the only way out seems to be embracing exactly the deal that Trump has spent a decade savaging. It's a delicate situation.
It's not unusual for an incumbent president's party to suffer setbacks in congressional midterm elections, so named because they come in the middle of a president's four-year term. While the president themselves is not on the ballot, all 435 House members and one-third of the Senate are. And in the past half-century, 3 second-term presidents, Reagan, Bush and Obama, have seen their parties suffer major midterm setbacks, which in turn has hampered their ability to govern.
Campaign 86, the battle for the Senate. At stake, the president's impact on Congress, the fate of troubled farmers, and industries fighting foreign competition.
Sounds a bit familiar.
Election night 86.
In 1986, despite having a 64% approval rating, Ronald Reagan's Republicans lost 5 House seats and 8 seats in the Senate.
From NBC News, Decision 2006, Election Night continues.
And in 2006, President George W. Bush's 37% approval rating dragged Republicans down by 30 House seats and 6 senators as the war in Iraq dragged on. In 2014, it was a similar story.
Voters across America chose Republicans in a rejection of President Obama.
I think he's the worst president we've ever had.
Just you wait, ma'am. Still, the 6-year itch and President Obama's feeble 41% approval rating saw Democrats lose 13 House seats and a crushing 9 senators that year. Although Bill Clinton's gains in 1998 did buck this overall trend. His approval was steady at 65%, despite or possibly because of Republican efforts to impeach him over the Lewinsky affair.
The fact is that this could have been a perfectly terrible day for Bill Clinton, and it wasn't.
Indeed, far from it. Democrats picked up 5 House seats and they held their ground in the Senate. But overall, you have to say history is not on Donald Trump's side this year. Heading towards this year's midterm elections, Trump's approval in pollster Nate Silver's average of polls has fallen 13 points since returning to office last year to now stand at 39%. Meanwhile, Trump is doing everything he can to alienate voters, it seems, erecting this gold statue of himself at his Doral golf resort on the weekend. And let's not forget that Let Them Eat Cake ballroom, which he claimed wouldn't cost taxpayers a dime, but which reports now suggest may ultimately leave taxpayers on the hook for $1 billion because of new security enhancements that are tied to the project. Meanwhile, generic congressional polls now currently put Democrats more than 5 points in front of Republicans. Given Republicans hold the House of Representatives with an effective majority of just 5, 218 to 213, lose 3, and it flips to Democrats' control. Republicans did have better hopes of holding on to their Senate majority. They won that in 2024. It's effectively still 53 to 47. With only 1/3 of senators up for re-election, the map was fairly good for Republicans, with even a few possible gains. But now, Democrats are daring to dream that they could sweep Congress this November, which is why we've seen a rather frantic effort by state legislatures to redraw electoral maps and try and gerrymander some extra House seats. It started with Republicans in Texas, of course, so California Democrats hit back with partisan redistricting of their own, and then last week, the state Supreme Court in Virginia struck down a referendum that could have helped Democrats there win 4 Republican-held House seats as well. So that setback now gives Republicans arguably the upper hand again, Chaz, and the president who has spent the last decade accusing his rivals of rigging elections may be about to do exactly that for reals.
Oh, there's lots of rigging to go around, John, at the moment. America is locked in a gerrymandered loop of doom. But let's break this down. Firstly, I should emphasise that redrawing maps in the middle of a 10-year census cycle, Very unusual stuff. States usually redraw their electoral lines after each census. In fact, between 1970 and 2025, only 2 states, Texas and Georgia, one time each, voluntarily redrew their congressional maps between censuses for partisan advantage. That's it. This happened twice in 55 years, until Trump saw an opportunity last year.
We have an opportunity in Texas to pick up 5 seats. We have a really good governor, and we have good people in Texas. And I won Texas. I got the highest vote in the history of Texas, as you probably know. And we are entitled to 5 more seats.
Now, Texas wasn't really keen on fooling around with their maps, but Trump pressured them into it. So Republicans in Texas gerrymandered themselves 3 to 5 extra seats, depending on how the election goes. Then California responded with their new map that netted Democrats 5 extra seats around the same time as Missouri and North Carolina created 1 more seat each for Republicans. And Ohio drew 0 to 2 more seats for Republicans, depending on how that election goes. And red state Utah strangely drew 1 more seat for Democrats, because it's literally the only state in America that cares about trying to have fair elections right now. So Republicans, after all that, had a bit of an advantage, until Virginia held their referendum, which allowed this state to gerrymander 4 more seats for Democrats. And so now Democrats had the advantage, and Democrats were very pleased about that. The Virginia Senate President pro tempore, Louise Lucas, actually sold T-shirts with the new map on it, headed 10-1, referring to the state's new seat distribution. She also tweeted, "You all started it and we fucking finished it." Sadly for Lucas, she did not actually finish it, because Florida has just gerrymandered 4 more seats for Republicans. Also, the Supreme Court last week ruled that Louisiana will have to redraw its congressional map. The court essentially gutted a major section of the Voting Rights Act, which will now allow states to draw new electorate maps that weaken the influence of black voters, helping Republicans. And those red southern states do not require a second invitation. So, Tennessee and Louisiana seem certain to gerrymander 1 more Republican seat each, and Alabama and Mississippi might not be far behind. You see, something else happened this week as well that will provide some extra motivation for those state politicians who are unsure whether they should gerrymander or not. Back in 2025, Indiana refused to succumb to Trump's gerrymandering pressure. Some Republicans there felt redistricting mid-cycle wasn't appropriate. And on Tuesday night in Indiana, 6 out of 8 of those Republican state senators who voted against the gerrymandered maps lost their primaries. 5 of them to challenges that the president has endorsed. So that might focus the minds of other state senators a little bit. And after all that was when that Virginia Supreme Court handed down its 4-3 decision that John mentioned earlier that found the redistricting referendum was unconstitutional, largely based on technicalities relating to timing. So if we strike off those 4 gerrymandered seats in Virginia, the Republicans suddenly, as you can see, have a clear advantage going into the midterms. You might be wondering what Louise Lucas has to say about all that. Well, she had other things on her mind this week.
Very influential Democrat from Virginia, State Senator Louise Lucas, is at the center of a major FBI corruption investigation. Right now, in fact, agents are executing search warrants across the Commonwealth, including her office. So, was that investigation political retaliation from Trump for her being a smart aleck? It's hard to know. The investigation did begin under Biden, but then again...
Lindsay Halligan, one of Trump's very closest allies and a former lawyer of his, had been running the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Virginia. She had been pressuring and pushing prosecutors to bring charges against Lucas, believing that that would be important, a high-priority case. I'm told that Halligan believed it would be good for the White House to be able, before the midterms, to accuse a prominent state Democrat in Virginia with bribery.
But look, this is already too complicated. That's a whole nother story. The important thing is the Democrats are miles ahead in House polling, But this gerrymandering stuff does even things out a bit. Although we should note that Florida does have its own gerrymandering court case to worry about, so this story might not be finished yet. As for the Senate, the Democrats need to win 4 seats to get to that majority of 51. And according to the Cook Political Report, there are 2 toss-up states they could win in Maine and North Carolina, and 2 Republican-leaning states that they could win if they have a fantastic election, Ohio and Alaska. Then there are some real 1%ers. They're very unlikely in Texas, Iowa, maybe even a left-leaning independent Dan Osborne winning in Nebraska. But basically, everything needs to go right for the Democrats to win a 1-seat majority in the Senate, which makes the last development of this week very interesting. It seems President Trump wants to flip moderate Democrat John Fetterman to the Republican Party to destroy that 1-seat majority before it even exists. And he's recruited Fox News host Sean Hannity to act as a go-between for his efforts. Say what you will about Trump, John. He does fight hard.
Yes, that he does.
But this was a huge amount for us to take in over this last 4 or 5 minutes. So, while we speak to Dave Wasserman, Senior Editor and Elections Analyst for the non-partisan Cook Political Report, to make some sense of it all. Now, let's start with a big question. What are the chances, in your view, that the Democrats can flip the 4 Senate seats in the midterms that they're going to need to win the Senate?
Democrats have the advantage of a gruesome political environment for Republicans. There's no doubt that President Trump's campaign promises, including ushering in an economic golden age, extracting America from foreign conflict, and not making major changes to entitlement programs, independent voters and even a share of Republicans now see President Trump as having failed to live up to them. And Democrats have the additional advantage of an enthusiasm gap. They are highly motivated to vote, whereas Republicans are struggling to turn out voters in years when Trump is not on the ballot himself. That said, Republicans do have a couple of advantages that could shield them from losing control of Congress. And in the Senate in particular, there are only 4 truly purple states that are up for election in the Senate this year, and 2 of those are already held by Democrats. And so considering that the Senate is currently 53 Republicans and 47 Democrats, Democrats winning all 4 of those purple states would only get them to 49 seats. They're defending Georgia and Michigan, and they also are aiming to pick up North Carolina and Maine. And that means that Democrats need to go further down the depth chart of targets and play for states that voted for Trump by between 11 and 14 points in 2024. Those states are Ohio, Iowa, Alaska, and Texas. And Democrats are hoping for good luck in Ohio, where Sherrod Brown, a former Democratic senator, is running, and in Iowa, which is an open seat. But these are races that are going to be difficult even in a favorable year for Democrats.
If you were John Fetterman, what do you see as his best path towards winning re-election in 2028? Risking a Democratic primary, trying his luck as a Republican, or maybe even going independent?
So John Fetterman could be at the fulcrum of the Senate if Democrats somehow win control. And he's likely to be highly influential for the next couple of years in that case. But it's not clear that he has a route to re-election in either major party. And there are several Democrats, including Congressman Brendan Boyle from Philadelphia, who are thinking about challenging Fetterman on the basis that he's been too cozy with Republicans. But keep in mind that Fetterman is still pro-choice. He has voted for gun measures. He has taken stances on economic issues that are very populist and in line with what Senator Bernie Sanders supports. Those would make it very difficult for him to win a Republican primary. The smart money in Pennsylvania is that Fetterman is not going to run for another term in 2028, but if he did, he might have more success as an independent.
After the Supreme Court's Calais decision, we've seen a rush from red states to potentially gerrymander an extra few House seats for Republicans. You throw in the Democrats' loss of the Virginia gerrymandering court, and do you see this, when you add it all up, as having any impact in the midterms? Or do you feel confident the Democrats have a large enough potential House margin that this is unlikely to matter?
Well, it certainly does matter. It gives Republicans a ray of hope that they can hold on to their House majority. And right now, Democrats need to pick up 3 seats on net to win control. All together, we believe that Republicans are poised to pick up something like 6 or 7 seats from redistricting alone, which means that Democrats, instead of needing just 3 seats, are going to need to flip at least 10 Republican seats to get into the majority. From today's vantage point, though, there are at least 16 Republican seats at very, very high risk. So I still consider Democrats the favorites for the House, but not prohibitive favorites like they looked 2 weeks ago.
And Dave Wasserman, do you have a personal view as to the best way to deal with gerrymandering in the future?
It's funny, I'm actually writing a book about this at the moment. I believe that gerrymandering is a problem that can be fixed if there were the willpower to do so. What I am exploring is a system that minimizes splits of counties and municipalities to the extent possible. So in other words, if you have a county that has enough population for one district, you have to fit a district in that county as opposed to splitting it in 8 different directions. And the other component would be an algorithm that determines which configuration of districts results in the shortest total perimeter of district boundary. I believe that if the parties were to adopt a system that was of redistricting that was blind to race and party and respected existing administrative boundaries, then we would have far more competitive seats. We would have far more dialogue between the parties because you'd have bipartisan delegations from most states. And you'd also have a more representative institution that was more responsive to the changing attitudes of voters from year to year.
Well, that method works for me. Fingers crossed. Dave Wasserman, thanks for visiting Planet America.
All right, thank you.
Finally, with the war in Iran probably maybe winding down, interest in the Epstein affair seems to be cranking back up again. And finally this week, the Trump administration released the secret files.
Fox News alert, the Trump administration releasing the first batch of files related to UFOs and alien life.
Okay, I know this is just being put out there to distract us, but...
One file shows a NASA photograph from the Apollo 17 mission in 1972, showing 3 dots in a triangular formation. The caption reads, "There is no consensus about the nature of the anomaly, but that a new preliminary analysis indicated that it could be a physical object."
Could be, and there is some newer footage of mysterious orbs and star-shaped objects. Plenty of witness accounts, all very interesting. Nothing definitive and nothing to stop the skeptical or conspiracy-minded thinking there must be more they're still covering up. So it's pretty much like the Epstein files. Speaking of which, what's purported to be Epstein's suicide note has been released.
The alleged suicide note of Jeffrey Epstein, apparently found by his cellmate. He claims he discovered it just weeks before Epstein was found dead in August 2019. It is a treat to be able to choose one's time to say goodbye, Epstein is alleged to have written.
But did Epstein write it?
He probably did write this, but there are limitations because we don't have enough to compare.
Because most of Epstein's communications are in the form of emails, not handwritten notes. And that doesn't even address the question of possible coercion in writing the note. On July 23rd, 2019, Epstein was found on the floor of his prison cell after what was later determined to be a suicide attempt. At first, though, Epstein told officers that he thought he had been attacked by his cellmate. He's an ex-cop who was awaiting trial for 4 murders for which he has since been convicted. Epstein later recanted the claim that he'd been attacked. His cellmate, Nicholas Tartaglione, claims that he found Epstein's note slipped into a book that he was reading. And, adding to the mystery around this, surveillance video from outside their cell that night was permanently deleted. Epstein's death 18 days later came after he was moved to a new single cell and was determined by the medical examiner at the time to have been suicide, although many are not convinced, including his partner in crime.
I do not believe he died by suicide, no.
And do you believe that, do you have any speculation or view of who killed him?
No, I don't.
But if we still don't know for sure about Epstein's death, we do know one of his former best friends is President of the United States, and another longtime friend and business associate is the US Commerce Secretary. This is Howard Lutnick, who told congressional investigators in private testimony last week that he couldn't recall why he and his family had lunch on Jeffrey Epstein's private island in 2012. That was years after he claimed to have broken off all contact with Epstein. This was the response to that from Democratic Representative for Arizona, Wasserman Ansari.
After what we have seen so far in this transcribed interview, I feel very comfortable saying that Howard Lutnick is a pathological liar who is enabling the most egregious cover-up in American history.
Maybe. And while the truth is out there, we may be no closer to knowing what it is, Chaz.
Especially not while House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer has changed the format of the hearings to be roundtables instead. These roundtables apparently look and feel like regular hearings, but they don't require witnesses to speak under oath. There's no opportunity to consider subpoenas, and there are no votes allowed on transparency measures. So they're kind of a farce, John. But now we're approaching the shadow of the midterm elections. This might be the way it's going to stay, at least till November.
President Trump announcing a new operation. This is Project Freedom.
Operation Project Freedom.
Project Freedom is underway.
A humanitarian mission.
The mission, unblock the strait.
We have established a powerful red, white, and blue dome over the strait.
The oil markets are going to love it.
And we're going to do it as a favor to the world.
Project Freedom is ongoing.
Iran with a nuclear weapon, and maybe we wouldn't all be here right now. I can tell you the Middle East would have been gone, Israel would have been gone. They're sick people. These are sick people.
I am proud of Project Freedom. Project Freedom will work.
The very latest on the war in Iran, the Trump administration's Project Freedom now on hold.
President Trump paused Project Freedom less than 48 hours into the operation.
On Monday, that's when the president launched Operation Project Freedom. But then by Tuesday, that was put on pause.
Just 2 ships made it through the Strait of Hormuz in 36 hours.
Gone too soon. And that is it for another trip to Planet America. We'll see you back here on ABC TV at the same time next week. You can catch us anytime on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook.
And on this week's Planet Extra Pep podcast, we talk about flipping Featherman. We'll see you there.
All right.